How's it going, everybody? This is Clark Hellscream, and we're doing part 5 of card reviews from Scholomance Academy. I'm absolutely excited about this set because we have so many flavorful cards that are being announced, and not to mention that we have a lot of powerful cards that can actually be utilized in very, very interesting ways. So let's just go ahead and jump right into it. The first card that we're going to talk about today is a 5-mana 4/4 by the name of Vectus. Battlecry, summon 2 1/1 whelps. Each gains a death rattle from your minions that have died this game. So there's a lot of different ways that this card can be utilized. It can be used in aggro decks, it can be used in mid-range decks, and it can be used in control decks. So this is already a 5 for 5 in terms of flavor being used all throughout the archetype spectrum. So what cards can be used? Totem Goliath is very, very interesting. All egg cards, so you know aggro has a field day if you're able to get 2 eggs summoned out of this on curve nonetheless. Suddenly Death Rattle Hunter is looking especially scary and wild. While you also have some other meme cards such as Loosen Bark, or you know if you want to get wild, if you get crazy with wild and play Thaddeus, that is also something that you can do. But then literally what was just released in the most recent expansion from Ashes of Outland, you have all the primes. All of your Zigzaw primes and your Solarian primes and your Murgles. So there's a lot of different ways that this card can be utilized. I really think that this card has a way of being in a meta deck, not only in Wild but also in Standard. In Standard, it's a little bit up in the air about what can be more powerful, but I'm gonna go ahead and give this card a 5-star ranking because I really think that it will see play in both formats. Again, like, getting your primes, even getting 1 death rattle out of this, depending on how powerful that death rattle is insane. Unfortunately, you can't use cards like Razor Gore with it very well, because, you know, if if you bring back a 1/1, then give it -1/-1, so it's not going to be that good. So this card it has some disenergies, but, you know, I still give it a 5 for 5 because it has something it can be good with. Next up, we have Ross Frostwhisper, which is the Shaman Mage dual class legendary. A 5-mana 3/6 at the end of your turn, deal 1 damage to all minions, improve by spell damage. So there's one card specifically that was released recently that could be used very, very, not necessarily effectively, but it's more funny more than anything. But you know, Mozaki Master Duelist, the 5-mana 3/6 mage legendary that was just announced. After you cast a spell, gain +1 spell damage. So if you're somehow able to get Sorcerer's Apprentice on the field with that already there, you can have some kind of really insane swing turn. Or in Wild, you could potentially set up some kind of cube combo, which is hilarious when you think about it. But in Standard, it has a lot of different ways of being utilized because Mage has a lot of spell damage support that's being released. But what about Shaman? Shaman is a little bit more up in the air because they have a decent amount of spell damage, but it's a little bit more awkward for them to make room with this with the current archetypes that they have. Control Shaman just really doesn't have a lot of support. So I'm not sure if this will see a ton of play in Shaman, but there's also the possibility that, you know, you can run this card with the +2 spell damage dragon, then suddenly you have a 3 damage AoE going to your opponent for everything. So I think that has potential, but I think that there's going to be other cards that are more powerful in Shaman, in the meta particularly, that kind of limit how well this card will be used in Shaman. In Mage, it has a lot of meme application, and maybe these new spell damage cards that have been printed can kind of carry it. But I'm going to go ahead and preemptively give it a 3, because I really feel like there's going to be more powerful cards that have been announced. Next up, we have Groundskeeper, a 4-mana 4/5 taunt. Battlecry, if you're holding a spell that costs 5 or more, restore 5 health. So Druid is probably really happy to get this card. Depending on the build of Druid, I mean, there's really a lot of Druid decks that play Glowfly Swarm and play cards that are 5 or mana more. I really feel like it's going to see a lot of play in Druid because it just really helps you out. It's a taunt minion, it also heals you. Glowfly Swarm, Overflow especially is really good in Druid since Ysera is just so powerful at getting you some free dragons. And there's a lot of talk around Ysera Druid being particularly good with the new legendary that, you know, reverses the that sets your deck, you know, 9 drops, 8 drops, 7 drops. I'm explaining it terribly, but the card that puts all of your high cost cards at the top of your deck. That's really good with Druid. So this card is just going to be like a really good way to kind of help you bridge the gaps to get to those later stages of the game. Maybe you don't have your Overflow on turn 4, so you can play this as a really useful taunt minion, and also get some healing out of it. So it's got a lot of applications. In Shaman, though, it doesn't have the greatest applications, but it's still good. So, like, in Control Shaman, you have Earthquake and you have Hagatha Scheme, So that's one way of making this work in Control Shaman. But something else that you guys should consider, something else you may want to consider, is that, you know, Bloodlust is a 5 mana spell that can go a long way. And, you know, in aggro mirrors, sometimes if you have that one taunt minion, that can literally win you the game. And this also gives you healing. So that's a twofer in the aggro matchup to really help you out. It doesn't really help you with like straight up winning the game. It's more of a defensive card, of course, but that is a way to use it. So for that reason, I'm going to go ahead and give Groundskeeper a 4 because I really think that it's powerful. And the only reason I'm not giving it a 5 at the moment is because I feel like there might be a way that this card doesn't see play due to a very, very aggressive meta. But in Druid, I really feel like it's going to get played almost no matter what. So next up, we have a very interesting legendary, Tenured Professor Tora, a 8 mana 3/12 rush minion. Whenever this attacks a minion, set the minion's attack and health to 3. So this is a very interesting card to say the least, because something that's kind of unfortunate about it is that it's not every single time, you know, this it attacks into something. It's whenever you attack with it. So unfortunately, there's only so many ways that this card can be used. Because, like, obviously you can play duel, and it's really, really powerful that way. And unless I am misunderstanding the way that this card is worded, I'm pretty sure that it's only going to work when you physically attack with the card. So that way, if your opponent has like really, really big minions they're trying to trade off with, it doesn't blatantly just get rid of everything. So for that reason, I feel like this card is not as powerful as I initially thought. Because if it was the way that the other way that I'm thinking, to where every single time this has any kind of attack going into it, then it also will change that to a 3/3. So in that case, if the minion does that, then it's absolutely insane. But as of right now, I'm just going to treat it as, you know, whenever it physically attacks. So for that reason, I'm going to have to give this a 2. It's just not really as good as other cards that Paladin can use. However, this is very good for single removal, which is something that Paladin really doesn't have access to. So maybe you can play this in some kind of dual deck. And, you know, if you're able to get this out on turn 5, that's a really, really good minion for you. You know, you're able to keep control of the board, and you can actually give duel some support, so I kind of like it for that reason. Extremely good flavor. I'm just kind of uncertain about how powerful this effect is. Next up, we have a pretty interesting spell that has already been talked about a decent amount already. Gift of Luminance. A 3 mana spell for Priest and Paladin. Give a minion Divine Shield and summon a 1/1 copy of it. So, best case scenario, if you're able to play, like, let's just use Paladin for an example. If you play Argent Protector, or any 1-drop really, into this spell on the coin, then suddenly your turn 3 Blood Knight looks absolutely amazing. Do I think that this makes Blood Knight viable? No, not by any means. But in any case, this is one of those classic cards to where you kind of need to have something on the field to where on curve it'll be absolutely amazing. But you could always use this later on in the game on, say, like a taunt minion or a death rattle minion that's particularly powerful. So Priest in particular could really use this on Possessed Wanderer. I think I'm mispronouncing the card, but it's the 2/6 destroy a random minion. The Possessed Villager. Sorry, no, Possessed Villager. Okay, it's not Possessed Villager. Okay, you know the card I'm talking about. But in any case, you know the one that destroys a random minion. This can go a long way with that. And there's also other cards in Priest that are particularly useful. Like if you give yourself another Prime, like literally the Prime Death Rattle thing is coming up again because it's actually very relevant. And Paladin, you know, if you're able to do it with Murlocs, maybe this is pretty useful. But I really don't see this being used in an aggro deck unless, you know, somehow Divine Shield Paladin is able to really carry itself with Blood Knight somehow. So this is going to be, in my opinion, probably a mid-range card that's going to see more play in Priest because they can really utilize, you know, summoning a copy of a minion very, very well. I feel like in Paladin, it may have possibilities with, like, some of the Librams. Like, if you want to give yourself a 3rd Libram, that's possible. But it's just not as powerful as I would want it to be in Paladin. So I'm going to go ahead and give this card a 3. And the only reason why I'm not giving it a 4 is because I question about how well this will actually see play in Priest compared to the strategy we already have now with Galakron Priest being on top. But it's definitely an interesting card. And if you're able to get some Death Rattle synergy with it, it's absolutely insane. Next up, we have the Cutest Card Award. There's a lot of conversation around the token minions for this. But it's a 1 mana Druid and Hunter spell. Give a minion +1/+1, summon a 1/1 cub, add a cub to your hand. So essentially for 1 mana, you get to buff your minion, give yourself a minion on the field, and then another minion in your hand. So this, again, is kind of screaming like aggro token druid for me. But how can this be used in Hunter? Hunter, this is just a good way to like give your somewhat decent minions an even better stat line, such as like Phase Stalker, for example. If you're able to play that on turn 2, you can play this on turn 3, make it a 3/4, and then hero power to give yourself a secret, and give yourself a 1/1 in addition to that. So there's also the application of like, you know, Faceless Corruptor. If you give yourself this 1/1 cub, that suddenly you have an easy way of getting value out of that. But I really feel like this card is going to see more play in Druid if it does see play, because aggro token Druid could really use this card. If you're able to like just play like Acorner on the Acorn Bearer, I'm sorry, on turn 1, then you're able to buff this immediately, have a cub, and then you play another cub, and then you have another card that's giving you more 1/1s. I think that could be potentially powerful, but the cubs by itself are definitely not that good, because it's literally just a 1/1 token minion. So if you need more tokens, this is particularly good, but the buff really isn't as good as you would want it to be, I feel like. So for that reason, I mean, for cuteness, it's definitely a 5. But for actual power level, I want to give it a 2, but I'm going to be nice and give it a 3, because maybe this can do something for Druid, and maybe there's an application, a Hunter I'm not thinking of. Maybe there's a Rush minion that would be really happy to have a +1/+1, because, you know, Zixor Prime being a 3/5, it's a bigger deal than being a 2/4, so it has ways of being good. I'm just going to go ahead and give it a 3 and call it safe. Next up, we have Researcher. A very interesting mage minion, a 1 mana 1/3 +1 spell damage minion. So the best way to think about this card is that on 2 mana you have 2 damage with this plus your hero power, and that's already a big deal, because this is probably going to kill more minions on turn 1 or turn 2 than mage has had in the past, if you're able to play it on turn 1, of course. But then you also have the aspect of, hey, it's also got spell damage. So this is just one of those cards that I feel like we'll see play if spell damage is really something that mage wants to have, in addition to the fact that having a 1-drop is pretty decent. The only real issue with this card, in my opinion, is unless you have a way to really utilize the spell damage, then top decking this in the later stages of the game is really unfortunate. It's really not what you want to get, and it's not like a 1/3 stat line is going to be able to do that much. And since it only does spell damage, it doesn't really have anything else going for it. So maybe for that reason, it's not as powerful as people are making it out to be. But a 1 mana 1/3 is to not be taken lightly. If it gets played on curve, that is absolutely insane. So for that reason, I'm going to go ahead and give this card a solid 4. Because I feel like Mage could really use this card, and maybe we'll see some cards like Arcane Explosion be a little bit better, or randomly generated Arcane Explosions can be better because of this card, because suddenly it's not as bad as you think. So I'm going to go ahead and give it a 4, and being a little optimistic with this card. Next up is probably one of the most powerful cards, in my opinion, to be released in the most recent hours. A 6-mana Druid Shaman dual class card. Choose one, summon 4 2/2 Treant Totems, keyword Treant Totems, or if you choose to, give yourself 2 Overload and give them Rush. So the biggest thing about this card is that most people are just going to see this as a 6-mana card that gives you 4 2/2 minions and Overload and Rush. Because like the Overload really isn't that bad, considering the fact that there's really not, I mean, because the Rush is just so good, right? You essentially have the option with this card, like in Druid, to just like play a guaranteed summon 4 minions, kind of like Glowfly Swarm, except, you know, you're not that dependent on the spells being in your hand. Or if you're behind, say like if your opponent does play Glowfly Swarm for exactly 4 minions, you can give them Rush and immediately trade into it. Is that the best way to utilize this card? Probably not, but the fact that you have that option to be defensive or to be proactive automatically makes this card very, very powerful, especially in a class like Druid that already wants as many token minions as possible. And now you're giving it to Shaman that also makes these Treants and Totems, so like both classes can use this very, very effectively and very flavorfully nonetheless. Like in Wild, you can transform these into 5/5s with the Ancient Tree Speaker. I forget exactly what it's called. I think it's just called Tree Speaker or something like that, or Tree Ancient or something. But, you know, in Standard, we have a lot of totem support right now. You have Totemic Reflection, you have Totemic Might, you have Oh god, the other one that increases the HP. I forget. But in any case, you have totem support, and this is just another card that is gonna make totem token shaman really something to worry, to be honest. Like, it's gonna look like the go-to aggro deck for a lot of players. So like, I'm really excited to see what this is going to enable. So for that reason, I'm gonna give this 5 stars because this card is just so flexible. You can be proactive or reactive with it, and I don't really think that the overload is going to hurt you all too much, depending on what kind of decks you put this in. So 5 stars for sure. All right, so we got 2 more cards that are both legendaries, and they are very flavorful, so be on the edge of your seat, guys. Next up, we have Jaundice Borov. This is some kind of weird World of Warcraft character that I don't know. I'm just going to go with the fact that it has a really cool battle cry. A 5-mana 2/1 mage and rogue legendary dual class legendary nonetheless. Battlecry, summon 2 random 5-cost cards. Secretly pick one that dies when it takes damage. So I don't know exactly how this is going to set up in terms of, like, it's probably just going to be like one of those things where, like, it's discover, but it just shows you the cards, and then you get to pick before it summons them. So that's pretty interesting, to say the least. You don't really get to have a way to fodder them out, so I kind of like how this card is just really random. But the thing is, there's a lot of 5-mana cards that are very underwhelming. And, like, really, like, the average 5-drop can be, like, you know, like this, like a 2/1 that isn't very good to get, or you can get, like, a potential, like, a 5/6, or maybe something with, like, Death Rattle, if you get, like Apple Bombs or something like that, if that's in rotation. I don't remember. But in any case, like, this has a lot of different ways of making, like, a board very possible in decks that really can't be too board-centric around this time in the game, except for Rogue, obviously. Mage has a lot of ways of, you know, curving out, but if they don't curve out, then this is a very nice way of giving yourself some leeway, and especially depending on the random 5-drops that you get, suddenly you have a board that your opponent has to deal with, or somehow you have a way of really utilizing the stats that get taken off of this. So I imagine more times than not what's going to happen with this card is that you're literally just going to choose the lowest HP minion anyway, because it's more likely to die in one hit as it is. But if you're fighting something like Mage or Rogue or anything that can deal 1 damage very easily, then the only time this card is really going to be a toss-up is if, I mean, maybe you hit 2 of the same card, and it's just like, do you want to give it to the right or do you want to give it to the left? So I think that this card has a lot of cool ways of being utilized in Rogue, particularly. Mage is also kind of cool as well, because again, like, if you don't have something to lead up to it, then you might be able to play this and your opponent has to deal with it. So I'm gonna go ahead and give it a 4, because the flavor's really carrying it. Like, if you want my honest opinion, it's probably a 3, but I really want to see this card see play, so I'm gonna go ahead and give it an optimistic 4, in the hopes that maybe Mage or Rogue can really utilize this card in some way that'll be very meta. I'm sorry. And last up, the most interesting card I would say that we've had in this expansion. Good lord. I'm just gonna look at this card for a little bit, like, guys, because look at how pretty it is nonetheless. Oh my god. So 7 mana 6/8. Whenever your opponent draws a card, add a copy to your hand that costs 1 mana. So before I get into, like, the crazy decks that this can go into, let's just think about this card being in every single deck. Because if you play this against your opponent, not only are you going to know what card is going to be drawn next turn, it is going to be in your hand and is going to cost 1 mana. Depending on, like, unless you get a backstab or something like that, then this card is almost always going to give you so much value and information on your opponent's hand. So, like, the power level of this card is through the roof, in my opinion, in terms of, like, how you can use it and how lucky you can get yourself sometimes. Now, in Wild, you have the funny combo of playing this into Cold Light Oracle, so that's pretty funny, but at the same time, like, since it's 7 mana, you can't actually play the cards that you get. And I'm actually wondering if this is the card that made them think, you know, maybe we should make Galakrond cost 0, because I imagine when this first was released, it was, you know, you add a copy to your hand, then it costs 0. That's just me giving Hearthstone team a little good banter. But in any case, what are the crazy decks that this can go in? Resurrect Priest is the first thing that comes to mind. If you're able to get 2 of these resurrected in the same turn, suddenly you get 2 cards from your opponent that cost 1 mana, and depending on what they are, it can utterly win you the game. Suddenly, two Plague of Deaths against your Priest opponent is just going to be so massive if you're fighting a Priest Mirror. But like, dude, like this card just has so many ways of seeing play. If your opponent can't clear it and needs to draw cards, they're gonna be like, crap, I don't want to draw my cards and give my opponents literally every single card information that I can give them. Like, the application of this card is absolutely insane. And I'm kind of scared of this card, to be honest, because I really feel like there will be a meta deck that will probably utilize this very, very well. My first thought is probably Galakron Priest. Or like just some kind of Priest deck is going to just really take advantage of this card. There also might be the possibility that this card sees play in like Warrior. Like, what if you play Inner Rage into Bloodsworn Mercenary into this? That's pretty useful. And like just control decks really like this card because not only is information powerful, but getting free 1-mana cards that could be cheated out very, very easily is insane. Like, imagine playing this against a mage, you get a 1-mana puzzle box. That's a meme that'll definitely be on a future Trollden video. And those are the new cards for these past couple hours, guys. Like, Keymaster is absolutely insane, so I'm just gonna go ahead and leave him on there for the rest of this video so you guys can just look at the power level of this card. Automatic 5 stars for my opinion. I feel like this card is definitely going to see play. But there you have it. These are the new cards that have been released in recent hours. I hope you guys enjoyed it. We're going to be doing another card review once we have more cards that are revealed. We have a lot of insane valuable and insane flavor to come our way. So I really hope that you guys are hyped up about the expansion as me. Are you hyped up? Is there a certain card that you like? Feel free to let me know in the comments, or if you feel like I'm wrong about something, also let me know. I'd like to have a good conversation about it. You guys have a good one, and thank you so much for watching.